Believe it or not, people have actually been using this cave system for over 1,000 years. We have a really long history. The first humans who ever used Colossal Cave were the Hohokam Native American people who, if you didn't know, were some of the first recorded Arizonans who ever existed, and they used to use the cave like a hotel. They didn't stay here super long. This was part of their trade route that went all the way to Mexico, so they needed lots of pit stops along the way. They just stopped for a couple nights at a time, right? Caves were also sacred to Hohokam people. Thanks for asking. It's over here. It's super shiny. This also 21, and it was formed a lot slower compared to other formations in the cave because it was connected up to its own ancient spring system. We think that this formation took a really long time to grow. If you check out the in here.
it's a 800, a little over 800 miles.
And like right in certain places on the border, like in Patagonia, Tucson, the very time you go over the top of Mount Lebanon, that can be more home than state park, right?
This is a county park.
Yeah, state park, so like in the county.
Well forward troops and a little over 800 miles.
And like right in certain places on the border, like in Patagonia, Tucson, the very time you go over the top of Mount Lebanon, that can be more home than state park, right?
This is a county park.
Yeah, state park, so like in the county.
Well forward troops and
In believe it or not, people have actually been using this cave system for over 1,000 years. We have a really long history. The first humans who ever used Colossal Cave were the Hohokam Native American people who, if you didn't know, were some of the first recorded Arizonans who ever existed, and they used to use the cave like a hotel. They didn't stay here super long. This was part of their trade route that went all the way to Mexico, so they needed lots of pit stops along the way. They just stopped for a couple nights at a time, right? Caves were also sacred to Hohokam people, so they didn't like to mess around in here. That's why you won't see any evidence of them beyond this room, and the evidence that we do have is this big smoke stain on the ceiling. Kind of see that right there, right? It's a little bit hard to see because my light's a bit dim. And they also left behind some artifacts. We'll check out some of those later on. If they had ever gone further inside of the cave, they would have found that this room is as far as all of the daylight goes inside of it. And as you can see, there's not much to start with. Beyond this point as well, so far we've mapped out 39.4 miles worth of cave system. It's colossal. Yeah, my jokes don't get better, so buckle up. Really big cave, terrible place to get lost, so they just stay in here. Hohokam culture as we know it ended in the 1500s as their descendants just kind of dispersed and joined other groups in the area, creating our First Nations as we know them today. And ultimately, people forgot about the cave system. It wouldn't be used again for another 400 years. A man named Solomon Lick owned a hotel 2 miles away from here in 1878. And he was ultimately the guy who rediscovered the cave. But he's got kind of an infamous reputation here. When he was wandering through the valley one day, he discovered a 2.5 foot wide stinky mystery hole. It was completely pitch black, jumped straight into it, and decided that he'd use this cave as a gimmick for his business. He invited in every single guest that he could to trespass in here and steal our formations as souvenirs. You're going to see the effects of that damage. It continued for 30 years before anybody knew about it or tried to stop it. As we continue through the tour today, please just remember that today the cave is federally protected. For us employees, it's illegal for us to take the dust out of the cave. So take only pictures, leave only footprints, and kill nothing but time. Got it? Go. Now, through the next parts of the tour, I'm going to do my best to overwarn you not to hit your heads and trip. Granted, I'm only like 5'8". You're probably taller than me, so as we go through, remember to watch your surroundings just in case there's anything I'm unaware of, okay? This next hallway, it's best to stick to the left. In the floor on the right-hand side, there's a big hole. Come on down. Our next stop is the Crystal Forest. Yeehaw. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the
Awesome.
Here is super shiny. This also. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Bottom up the temperature, bottom right is humidity, the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. Or if you can't see. Alright. So, welcome to the Crystal Forest. Now, our cave is a karst cave, which means all of its development begins with water, and that's how our formations grow as well. Water has to pass through the limestone in the mountain above us like a giant sponge, and as it does, it picks up tons of minerals, right? When it finally drips from the ceiling, those minerals build the exact same way as how an icicle does, and you get our stalactites and stalagmite formations as a result. They grow really, really slowly. Typically, these formations will only grow 1 cubic inch every 100 years in a cave that has water inside of it. It's very slow going. Most of our formations are also flat on the ends. That's not natural. That's because of people coming in here, snapping them off, and taking them home. Normally, they'd steal our formations so they could use them for really important stuff like decorations, door stoppers, and chalk. We're also pretty sure they used to eat some of them. This is calcium carbonate, which is the main ingredient in Tums. So you need some bat poop flavored Tums to cure your heartburn. Classy. Records show that actually people have been eating these substances out of caves since as far back as the 1500s, so it's definitely a well-recorded practice, and people still do it sometimes today. Now, as for the rest of the cave system, it is really dry in here. We are considered to be dormant. There are parts that are currently growing. It's just not widespread through the cave system. And because it's not every day that every single part of this cave is wet, that just means that we are dormant. The last time we were active was the Ice Age, so we've got dust building ever since that point. People usually want to see what the crystals look like when they're not super dusty. Generally, they tend to look something like this. Ooh, chapstick. Beautiful. You guys are a very enthusiastic crowd. Very lively. No, but this is Old Baldy. Solomon used to invite his guests to rub Old Baldy's head for good luck, and when they did, their hands stripped off those protective minerals and exposed the calcite underneath. Wait, a little balancing act there. Ta-da! Really, really cool, but unfortunately, another really good vandalism example here. This is why we don't touch, because people rubbing their hands on this guy has effectively sealed him off forever. We never expect it to grow back as a result, and since he's kind of a lost cause, we use this as our get it out of your system rock. You can touch this one if you want. Just please remember, we can't clean it, so there's germs on this dating back to 1878. They've been cultivating nearly 150 years, and last year, I personally saw a grown woman put her whole mouth on it. Yeah, it was gross. If you want to touch him, you can, but you really don't have to. We're also going to see him on our way out of the cave, which is when most guests prefer to touch him, because you can slap him goodbye and get hand sanitizer pretty much immediately afterwards. Otherwise, you can touch him twice or not at all. It's entirely up to you. This next staircase, though, kind of uneven. It's a little wonky. Try and use the left handrail at the top first. If you grab the formations on the right, you'll not only be damaging the formations, but they tend to be kind of slippery. So start on the left-hand side. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. As you're coming around this next bend, the pocket in front of me has a really pretty view, so if you want to get some photos, you are more than welcome to. Please just watch your heads on Fang. This is our largest stalactite. People tend to smack their heads right into him, despite being the biggest thing in here. As you come through, if you're 5'8" or more, please watch your heads. I used to be 6 feet tall. That's why my jokes are so bad. As you come through, he weighs in over 4,000 pounds. It's like about 2.5 tons of the weight of an F-150 hanging from the ceiling. So as you come through, watch your noggins, and if you hear anything that sounds like a bell, check the person behind you in line. He's a cave bell. These are actually really common. Most caves won't show this to you because they don't want to encourage their guests to wander around and smack their hands on stuff. We don't either, and if you're curious and you want to see which formations ring, just ask. I'll let you use my spatula. It's rubber, it's antimicrobial, and it makes a better sound than your hands do, so I really don't mind sharing. These formations are also completely solid, so depending on the purity of the crystal inside of it, it'll change the sound you get, which means you can never tell what you'll get just by looking at them. Start a band, make some rock music. I got a lot of bad jokes. It's easy to take for granted. I don't know, maybe I'm just jaded. I spend a lot of time living down here. Come on through, you guys. Our next stop is the drapery room.
Sounds like movie.
It's a really pretty
Yeah,
room.
right?
Watch your heads coming up your ears. Super, super salsa. Thanks for asking. Ears, super, super salsa. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. Drapery, and they actually make a really cool sound. Most of our formations in the cave will sort of ring and ding like bells do. So you get some nice sounds, but these ones, for some reason, sound like wood. It's mostly just to do with the structure inside of it, but yeah. Welcome to the drapery room. Gets its name because we got drapes. Ta-da! Looks like curtains, right? This is a classification of what we would normally consider flowstone and dripstone, which is caused by water flowing and dripping through the cave system, but it's not usually this well developed. Generally, it tends to look a lot more like mashed potatoes and melting ice cream, like you can kind of see right over here. This has just had a long time to grow, so it has these really cool dramatic and exaggerated sheets. As you can see, we have some really beautiful formations in here, and most of them have been affected by vandalism. But one of the people who went on the vandalism tour stopped them forever. His name was Frank Schmidt. When Frank came in here and he saw people actively breaking off formations, he was so appalled at the disrespect for Mother Nature, he bought the cave system just so that Solomon couldn't use it anymore. He was awesome. He purchased over 400 acres of land for only like $10,000. This makes me wish I had a time machine. Ultimately, he did, of course, stop the vandalism tours for good, and he began the first ever guided cave tours Colossal Cave had to offer. But the Great Depression hit, and he had to sell the land all over again. Honestly, most folks were looking to mine out the cave when they were buying it, because we have a lot of bat poop. It's actually super useful, so it's found a lot of things. But he didn't want to give it to somebody who's just going to be in here causing more damage. So instead, he gave it away for free to the government so they could make it a park. There were 3 conditions to the deal. The first was that he still wanted to live here and be the caretaker of the cave. He wanted to put in some floors. We didn't have any yet. This used to be a 38-foot drop.
Wow.
It was not very good. And he wanted to be a tour guide until he just couldn't do it anymore. They said yes, and Frank did his very last tour here when he was about 84 years old. He passed away at the age of 85 in 1957. We really love Frank for his dedication to protecting and preserving our gorgeous cave. But we also love him for our floors! Am I right, y'all? Thanks, Frank. These are flagstone pathways that were put in by the CCC, which, if you didn't know, just stands for Civilian Conservation Corps, which is a way to create jobs back in the Great Depression. If you wanted to join up, you could volunteer into the service, and they give you about $1 a day for some manual labor. That's how most of the railroads and tons of dams were built here. There were hundreds of these projects across the U.S. Of the $1 that they paid you every day, you were only allowed to keep 25 cents. The other 75 were sent home to your family to try to support them while you were out of town, so it wasn't all bad. For some reason, they didn't like to use maps when they were in here. It took about 4 years to complete, so they kind of needed a way to navigate through the cave. The preferred method was to draw giant arrows on the walls.
Yep.
Now, we had about 600 teenage-aged young men in here waiting 4 years for cement to dry. They had some free time because they used it to draw prank arrows everywhere. People totally got lost, but as far as we can tell, nobody died. How'd they get it? Well, they just used their formations. We had a ton in here. Quite a few actually look like faces. It's a common phenomenon called pareidolia, and I have a couple on this wall, so I'm going to have everybody see. So, first up, we have our cave witch. She's a good witch. She'll help you find the exits of the cave. Her name is Calpurnia. You can see her beautiful, long, flowing hair, her lovely eye and wart, and her nose. She's also only got one tooth because all she's ever eaten are limestone cookies. You guys see her?
Mm-hmm.
Eye, wart, nose, mouth, cookie. Her nose is pointing out of the cave down the pathway behind me, and the way that we just came in through. She's always pointing out, so they used to use her as a waypoint to get through the cave system. But I did kind of steal her job, so she's got some people giving her company while she's in retirement today. First of all, she has a cat. What witch doesn't have a cat? This is Shadow, right? You see his little ears?
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering, this is totally natural. We haven't altered this to make it look this way. She also has Mr. Magoo. You can see his nose, his eye, and his cup of tea right over there. Mr. Magoo, of course, being blind, is always going to point you further inside the cave. That's where we're headed next. Any questions before we continue? No? All right. I guess I'm going to squeeze out in front of you guys here. Just a second. There you go. Here. I'm going to squeeze right past you on your left-hand side.
Oops, sorry.
You're all
Excuse me,
good. You're all
guys.
good.
Sorry.
Alright, the next walkway we're going down is through here. Most of you guys are tall enough that you'll be able to hit the formation that's hanging down at the bottom of the staircase, so please just watch your heads. It's not too bad, but still. Then we'll see our weather station. It's been 71 degrees in this cave for thousands of years. It's actually really hot. It's just because we're in the desert and we soak up a lot of heat from the sun. Most caves are about 55 degrees and pretty high in humidity, but we're kind of an exception. Sort of like walking in the park. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and the top is barometric pressure. A very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. Please watch your step coming down. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and the top is barometric pressure. A very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. Alright, looks like we got just about everybody. This is one of my favorite parts of the whole tour. As we go through this next hallway, you're going to have a really hard time finding formations. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's because it was superheated by friction in the earth, and it formed into carbonic and sulfuric acid. Those two acids dissolved their way through over 40 miles worth of cave system, and you're going to see a buttload of those systems through here. You'll see lots of holes, tunnels, and passageways that wind around. These are those ancient channels of acid, and we call them Swiss cheese. We got a whole bunch of it. Pretty cheesy joke. I'll try to keep them breathe. It's a good one. I'm here all week. On your right hand side, about hip level, we have our most famous piece of Swiss cheese, folks. This is our bottomless pit. Don't drop anything inside of it, okay? If it's going in, it's not coming back out. That includes your hats, your glasses, your phones, and your dignity. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. Alright, y'all, we're about to make a big loop through this next part of the cave. You'll see some different artifacts, the first of which are from the Hohokam. These were actually found in the entrance room. There used to be way more artifacts in the cave, but unfortunately, people stole them, and the really, really nice ones Solomon would keep in his hotel as a showcase. Solomon's hotel burned straight to the ground. Yeah. We call that karma. But next up, you're going to see some of those. The first one is a mono and matate. It was used for making food. And the second is a mortar. It was just used for like pottery, pigments, paint, crafts, stuff like that. Then we're going to go see the tightest part of the tour. So if you're claustrophobic, or maybe we find out that you are, I don't want you to freak out too bad. It does get kind of narrow, but it's really not terrible. If you need a good distraction, I actually highly encourage all of you guys to turn on the flashlights on your phone. The left-hand wall is totally covered with hematite crystals. They're super, super sparkly. They're chunky. They're multicolored. It is great if you need a good distraction. Come on.
Is it on the left side?
Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I never had one of those. All red on buff, super beautiful. It's got this really nice buffed out pottery clay and a really nice design. Also, beer is super, super chunky. Also, bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. It's really fun. Definitely encourage it because I used to work in a retirement home before this, and I made a whole career change. I'm going to school for this semester. I'm really excited about it.
So what do you need to do?
Well, for this one, actually, you don't need any formal schooling on it. It just helps if you get like CPR certified and stuff. They'll also like do that for you here. Hang out in the back half of the room, just so that you aren't squished in like sardines. Come on up to the bar. Sorry, no drinks. This is a dry cave. Yeah, but I came here on a tour with my mom for Mother's Day almost 3 years ago, and my tour guide had really bad jokes, and I was like, these are my people, obviously. So I asked her, how'd you get a job here? And she was like, why? Do you want one? And a month later, I was hired. And since then, I've just kind of made it my whole life. I really
Okay,
like it.
a little longer than a month, but you'll get there.
When you turn 18, you'll be able to work here. Otherwise, you have to hang out in the gift shop. Yeah. Okay. This room is called the popcorn room. And if you look at that giant wall, you're going to find out why. Totally covered in popcorn, right? Now, these formations in our cave are caused by flooding. This room has a really long history of periodic flooding inside of it. In fact, the actual last time that it flooded was only 2021. It was up to your shins for 9 months. Our lights were broke for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very dark. We had to use little Amazon LED lanterns for all of that time. It was very tedious. But up here, you can see the original water line of the cave system.
Wow.
So a few thousand years ago, it would have been standing 15 feet underwater. All of that would have changed the cave's temperature by just a couple degrees, but that was enough to change the pressure and start to draw out air bubbles that were trapped in the wall. As they released out, they hit minerals in the water and it solidified them into our popcorn. What you're looking at there is essentially really stale ancient air that's been trapped in time forever. It's kind of lame, but I think it's cool. Hey Everett, why is this part blocked off behind you? That is because there are actually actively growing formations in there. We just don't want guests to wander up and accidentally touch something delicate without realizing it. But if you want, our ladder tour takes you up into that section, and you can also get married in this room.
Cool.
Yeah, seriously, the last guy who got married in there was dressed as a bat. It was so cute.
I would say odd, but okay.
Yeah, I heard it didn't work out between them because he was always winging it. I came up with these on the fly. He did actually
Getting
get married
better
just
at
as a
it,
bat.
getting better.
Thank you. You're just saying that so I let you live, but I appreciate it. But yeah, we're gonna go see my favorite showcase next. This one is from 1884. There was a train robbery actually right in front of Solomon's Hotel. Bandits stole a bunch of gold off of a train and then they hid in here. The idea was that they'd run into the cave, cops would chase after them and get lost in the cave system. The cops waited outside though, so they were just trapped in here for like a week. They ran out of food, eventually gave up and left, and they were captured and sentenced to jail for 18 years. Now, while they were in jail, the cops came in here looking for the gold, but they must have hid it in a really good spot because they never found it. And when the bandits came back, neither did they. We still don't know what happened to it. There's a really good chance that there's still a whole bunch of gold in here, so if you happen to see anything gold and shiny, please remember, I know all the exits, so you better share. Okay? We're going to see their stuff. We got whiskey, coffee, bandit soup, and trench coat. The coffee you can actually still find at Fry's. The packaging has not changed in almost 200 years, and the trench coat still has pit sweat. Barf. Yeah. Go ahead, walk around the wall. You're going to pass through the keyhole and join back up with the group. The bandits hiding out inside of the cave, but they were never confirmed because they didn't leave behind. Here's super salsa. Sometimes the humidity will change in there and people are like, whoa, it's colder, but it kind of depends on. Thanks for asking. There's some really bad pictures of me. Like, Google reviews are like in the middle of talking, and I'm like, man. Okay, guys, so here we got a hat in a box. Wow. This hat belonged to Frank, and Frank again did pass away in 1957, so flashlights, although they were around, they were kind of fancy to be using in caves for the time, so instead people tended to rely on carbide lanterns, which is what the thing at the front of his hat is. These are very practical, super straightforward to use. We actually still use these in certain circumstances, but they're a little bit outdated because there's a major design flaw. They're basically mini blowtorches strapped to your forehead. If you sealed the disc at the front up against anything, all the gases inside could rapidly pressurize, and then it would explode. So just a bomb strapped to your face. No biggie, right? It's a miracle he lived to be 85. Next, we're going to see some of the tools that they use to make the floors. We really like to talk about the wheelbarrow. This thing has no rubber on it because it was too expensive in the Great Depression. Instead, the wheel on its own is completely solid steel, so it weighs 60 pounds. The entire wheelbarrow is 70 pounds empty.
Whoa.
It's wheelie heavy.
Really?
I'm on a roll. Boo, get off the stage. Yeah, so we're gonna go see that. I want you to imagine 70-pound wheelbarrow carrying hundreds of pounds of materials through a cave that had very little lights, very little floors, and oh yeah, they were only being paid 25 cents a day. Accounting for inflation, folks, they would now only be making $85 a month. On your left, and this is your last chance to get a picture of the pit if you want one. So here we have the bottomless pit again. If you want to get some photos, this is your last chance to get them. Get some exercise. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. I don't have one here. It's super simple. There's a bunch of platforms inside that are super thin, so if you stand on it, you go right through, and that also means if you try to measure it by like dropping a camera or something down in there, it could land on one of the platforms and you wouldn't get an accurate reading anyway, thinking that that's the bottom of it. So we don't really know for sure. When that guy dropped his passport down there a couple of years ago, I should say, I had a manager at the time who actually went down to go get it because we could see it, so we were like, okay, we can try and retrieve that. That way we don't have to call the embassy because he wasn't from the U.S. We wanted to make sure he could get his flight home. Basically, he went down there and he said that it felt like 90 feet. Granted, he was a quarterback in high school. He was a pretty big guy, and it gets more narrow at the bottom, so it could have been that it really did feel like 90 feet just because the climb was hard. Hard to know for sure. Yeah. Any questions? No? Okay.
Silence.
Yeah, dead silence. It means I'm a good tour guide because you guys know everything.
That's right.
What country was he from?
I don't know. I didn't ask him.
I swear to God.
I think he
threw it down there on purpose.
He might have. I don't know. Granted, he could have thrown it in many different places in the cave, and he chose there. So maybe you got a point. This next staircase is called the domino staircase. 3 guesses why. If one of you trips and falls, so on and so forth, like dominoes, till all of you land on me. And I don't want it, so use the handrail, okay? My folks at the way back, I am counting on you to use that handrail, okay? Because you're the ones who are going to start the chain. When we get to the bottom, we'll be in our prehistoric riverbed. The last time that it flowed was actually close to 6 million years ago, so the formations in here are really, really cool to look at. They're very, very well developed. And we think that the true age of the riverbed is actually closer to 60 million years old, which, if you didn't know, is right around the time that the dinosaurs finally went extinct. So it's pretty darn old. Let's go check it out. We're going to stop next in a room where the water would pool in the cave, and you're actually going to be standing on a formation for about 6 feet of the walkway that's called cave ice. It's a pure slab of mineralized calcite on the floor. I'll point it out as we go through. You guys like that too?
Huh?
You like that too?
Yeah, my dad did.
All
right.
What is a vampire bat's favorite fruit?
I don't know.
Nectarine.
Ah!
Nectarine. These are called jellyfish. Just a fun little tidbit, right? Here is super simple. Also. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s.
boxing. Wait.
Here is super shiny. Salsa. Thanks for asking. So for you guys who are coming in right now, the part where I have my flashlight shining is that calcite slab on the floor I was describing just a minute ago. And it is the only formation in the cave you will be standing directly on top of. Welcome to the living room. When Frank and his family first moved here, for the first 10 years, they lived in a canvas tent. It was 1,000,000 degrees and they were crammed in it every single night for a decade. They hated it. It was super, super uncomfortable. So when the CCC came through, they asked them if they would build them a house, and they said yes. That house is now the gift shop.
Cool.
Now you know, right? Now, huge improvement for sure. They didn't really have any infrastructure to try and cool down the house though, because AC wasn't really a thing. They didn't have any other methods. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. Here is super, super shiny. Salsa. Fell down through. So kids like this big, fire strapped to their faces, they land in the rubble right behind you guys there. Right in that spot. And then you camp in here for 6 days at a time consecutively. Next up, you're almost at the deepest part of the cave. Deepest section, in between these two stairs behind me. As you go through, lots of people like to do a victory dance. You are more than welcome to. They'll be 72 feet under the earth. Please just remember, in the next section of the cave, formations will jump out and get you. Watch your heads on the right and watch your feet on the left. We're going to do an interaction.
Boxing.
Here is super, super shiny. Salsa. Here is super, super shiny. Salsa. Here is super, super shiny. Salsa. Alright y'all, so interactive section here. I'm going to pass around my UV light so that everybody gets a chance to use this, because our crystals have a super cool property called phosphorescence, which if you didn't know, means that it glows in the dark.
Yep.
Y'all see that? Hooray. This stuff is caused by a phosphorus isotope in our calcite that's just a little bit unsteady. So if you give it some extra energy, it causes the particles inside of it to move around, kind of bump together, creates a light that you can see. I'm going to pass around my light so you get a chance to do this for yourselves. If you want to try to draw something on the formation with the light like I do, you want to hold the light like an inch away from the formation and move down it really quickly. The brown that you'll be seeing is pollen and dust that's from our bats. Green and blue is calcite, though it does glow the entire rainbow, so don't be surprised if you see other colors too. You gotta get really close to it. Yeah, like that. There you go. And if you see blue powder, chances are it's not just on the formations, it's also on you, because folks, blue powder is pocket linked from people. We have to vacuum it out of the cave every year. It takes a week to vacuum the cave system. Thanks for asking.
Boxing.
Here is super simple. Salsa. Here is super simple. Salsa. I'm just kidding. That's a construction shaft. I'll explain more about it in just a minute when everybody can hear, but that is a construction shaft the CCC used to use. If you want to get a picture of it, make sure to do it once you get up here. When you come up the stairs further, you can't see it at all. Make sure to snag one now while you still can. And it was formed a lot slower compared to other formations in the cave because it was connected up to its own ancient spring system. We think that this formation took a really long time to grow. If you check out the little ripples along the sides of it, it's likely each ripple took somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 years to develop individually, just to give you a sense of scale. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since. Here is super simple. Salsa. I always notice a new formation every day I work here. Okay guys, this is that staircase I was trying to warn you about, so remember to use the handrail, try to sidestep, and at the bottom, don't forget to duck. There's a big boulder hanging down. Watch your step up here. Is super simple. Salsa. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s.
Yeah, go ahead.
You guys can come on down to the balcony if you want.
Alright, so everybody, this is the last stop on our tour. We've been in here for almost an hour. It's like a casino, right? Lots of no windows, that's how they get you. But I'm going to give my spiel and then I'll have a section for questions. And I do really love questions, so I'm always down. But this room is called the sinkhole because Frank named it that. It's not an actual sinkhole. Those are extremely dangerous. Instead, this is a structural cave-in. We think that it developed around 25 million years ago. So this thing has seen some stuff. And it's a really good record of the seismic history of this area. because all of the flowstone and dripstone inside of it is actually kind of fragile. It's about a 3 on the hardness scale. It's just a little bit above chalk. So any earthquakes that have come through here would pretty much guarantee to shake this up a little bit, create some fractures. But there aren't any, which means that this is super structurally sound. And it's not that the fractures are so small that we can't see them. We actually would be able to, because calcite can heal itself and it often forms scars. See that lip on that column right there? An earthquake shattered this column right along that line, and as water came back through, it started to develop extra calcite and healed itself together, but it overcompensated, making that scar. Calcite is actually one of the main minerals that they use in Hohokam building materials and also the Roman buildings as well, because anytime a building cracked, the next time it rained, the water would reactivate the calcite and it would heal itself back together. If that happened in here and there was an earthquake, there would most certainly be a ton of little scars all over it, and there are none. It makes a great shortcut, right? You'd hand Frank 25 cents to go on his tour. He would give you a candle and a rope. You take your candle, set it down on this stalagmite, take your rope, tie it around this guy right here, and then rappel all the way to the bottom of the pit. Folks, that's a 35-foot drop, and the staircase at the bottom is the entrance to the living room.
Wow.
Now, remember when we were in the living room, I told you about a 30-foot hole in the ceiling?
Yeah,
This is it.
that's it.
So if you were one of Frank's children, he would strap what was basically a bomb to your face. Then he set them loose on this with no ropes. They were expected to free climb. Dad of the year.
Wow.
By all accounts, Frank really loved his kids, and he was a good dad. It's just that they started doing this in the 20s. CPS wouldn't exist for another 15 years. It just wasn't something people were thinking about, but his kids lived. Any questions for me about the cave habitat, bats, dinosaurs, aliens, conspiracy theories, or anything else that's on your mind?
Where's the gold?
I think the only gold in here might just be my sense of humor. I wish I knew. I'd be retired by now. Any other questions? No? All right, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks. You're just saying that silly, Julie. But
Do they ever, test the, the structure to make sure that it's sound and?
thankfully, there's not really a need for it. Well, I mean, for one, our cave is 75 million years old, just about. So it survived a lot of really crazy seismic activity in the area, including the impact that killed the dinosaurs, which was only off the coast of Mexico. So it definitely had some sort of earthquake activity here because it happened all over the world for a really long time. But also, in a cave like this, it takes at least a magnitude 8 earthquake for anything to even start moving around in here. And we haven't had an earthquake here for easily 200 years. We're not due for one anytime soon. So unless we had a huge, crazy, natural disaster flood type situation come through, we're not super worried about the state of the cave. But we always try and make sure if there's anything out of place, we always mention it. But there hasn't really been anything. All right, you guys. Well, if you have any other questions or you just want to talk about Bigfoot after the tour or something, obviously I like to talk, so it's really not a problem. You guys have been a great crowd. Thank you for pretending my jokes are funny and humoring me. I really appreciate it. And my name's Everett. I really hope you liked it. We do, of course, accept comments, reviews. We also take tips. And thank you for visiting Colossal Cave. Happy holidays. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to get some pictures over on the balcony there, you are more than welcome to. When you're ready, we're going to head up the staircase and we're going to go say goodbye to Old Baldy. Come on up. Bottom left is temperature, bottom right is humidity, and the top is barometric pressure. Very complex instrument. This has been in here since the 40s.